Okay, in this short video, none of my videos are ever short, are they? We're going to have a look at different types of data. We're also going to look at how we can code data. And we're going to take a quick look at validation and verification. So let's start off with data types. Now, when you can put data into a computer in many different ways, and I guess if you're thinking about, let's say we're in a spreadsheet or a database or a word processor, most of the data that you're going to input into those sort of things is simply what we call text-based data. Some people refer to this as being what we call alphanumeric. So basically what I mean is if I put my name in, David, that's purely text. If I were to put in my part of my email address, which is djphillips1408, I have here a combination of letters and numbers also. But because it's a combination of letters and numbers, then in fact it's still referred to being as text. You can see here alpha, alphabet, numeric, numbers. So both of those examples are types of what we refer to as text-based data. Even though the 148 is numbers, it's still regarded as text because it's part of something else that has letters in it. But of course we could have just numbers on their own. And what you can get is that you have numeric data. Now, numeric data really can be split into two types. And you have what we refer to as integer numbers. If I write 1408 or 1480, most importantly, I think what we can say is this is a whole number. And because it's a whole number, we refer to it as being an integer. Now, in terms of databases, you can also have real numbers. And real numbers is where you would introduce the decimal point. For those of you that may go on to do sort of study computing, this is also sometimes referred to as what we call a floating point number. But at GCSE, or not GCSE, Cambridge Nationals, IT level, we can just refer to them as being real numbers. So real numbers, decimal point, whole numbers are regarded as being integers. But of course I could write in my date of birth, 14/08/1969. Now this obviously mainly consists of numbers, but I have these sort of forward slashes in there, and so therefore that quite clearly is numbers, but they're set in what we call a date form. That's a date piece of data, if that makes sense. Date data. I think it does make sense. Am I a man, male or female? Remember we had the one on a previous video about gender? Well, gender is a form of what we refer to as Boolean data, M or F. Are you thinking these videos are do you think this video is very good? Invites yes or no. In other words, with Boolean data, what we only have is two options available to us. We can select one of two options. There are other forms of data as well. At the end of the day, you could, for example, put into a database an image. An image is just nothing more than a graphic file, a JPEG, a GIF, a BMP, something like that. And there are other forms of data as well. I mean, you can have a video file. A video is actually none of these formats. It's not even image format because it's lots of images stuck together. And that might come in say, maybe an MP4 file or a WMV file. You can also have sound, for example. I'm recording myself doing this right now. I could export this little bit as maybe an MP3 file or a WAV file. Those sort of things you put onto your phones and listen to your funky music. At the end of the day, it's just data. And what I want you to understand at the beginning is that data can take many different formats and types. The thing is that, let's move on to another slide now, is that as what we're looking to do is that we would like to code our data where possible. In the previous video, I think I was going from London Gatwick to Alicante, and you all got my personal details, which is rather embarrassing. But I'm thinking that typing in London Gatwick, for example, is quite lengthy, and it invites spelling mistakes. But of course, when you go to an airport and they tag up your bags, you'll find that you'll normally get LGW well, you will get LGW on there. I think London Heathrow is LHR. I've forgotten what Stansted and all the other ones are. But the whole point is that coding data is the concept that we sort of shorten data down. You could even argue, when I did male or female a moment ago, male becomes just a simple M and female becomes an F. We've coded that data down. The reason being for coding data, and well, sort of several reasons really, is that one, it's quicker to type. You could also argue is it takes up less space, and that's a twofold reason behind that. One, in terms of the computer, it takes up less memory. If you actually, if I just quickly go off on one here now, each character takes up 1 byte of memory, and I'm sure you understand that on your memory stick you might have a 16 gigabyte memory stick, and basically a gigabyte is well, think of it as being a billion bytes. But the whole point being is one letter, like an L here, takes up 1 byte of memory. So London Gatwick is going to take 6 with a space, that's 7, and then a further 7. London Gatwick would take up 14 bytes of memory. LGW would only take up 3. So you can say that coding data is important because it reduces the amount of physical memory required in the computer to store the information. But also, if you have a online form, if you're coding things in, you can make the boxes actually smaller, so there's less screen space is required when you encode data as well. The other thing is that it's easier to validate your data. And validation is something that I'd like to move on to in a moment, because validation is all about the concept of trying to, and hopefully you won't get confused, I'll explain it, but validation and verification is the idea that we're hoping to do is that we're trying to make sure that the data that is put in is correct and accurate. Now, let's get one thing straight. Validation does not mean that it will be correct and accurate. It's a process that we use in computers to try and make sure that what you're putting in is what you meant to put in. So let's, I think we'll deal first of all with the concept of verification. So let's put this down here. Data verification. Right. Let's get a couple of bits straight, first of all. Data verification. The most common way that you'll see data verification is you might be on a screen on a website and it'll ask you for your email address. And you type it in there. And then you get another box that says confirm the email address. And the whole point is that you've got to type it in twice. And if there's a mistake, an error message will come up saying do not match. And that is what we mean by data verification. Data verification is really, I think the most common way of doing it is what we refer to the double entry of data, whether it be your email address or your password. So the computer will look for you to confirm that what you put in here matches what you put in here. And the chance of you mistyping your email address incorrectly twice are incredibly slim. And the chance of you putting a password in twice that is incorrect, not what you wanted, but you did it twice in a row, are very, very slim. So that's the process of data verification. It's a check to make sure that the data that you put in is what you intended to put in. It's basically it's entered correctly. Think of it that way. But we could put data in correctly that may simply not be possible. And this is what I want to move on to with the concept of data validation. Now, data validation, the technical definition is that it's a check by the computer, and this is the important part, to see if data is possible. And it's important to emphasize that it is not to do with the fact that it is correct. It's not correct. It's about to see if it's possible. Now, I'm going to walk you through a few examples, and hopefully that will make sense. Now, quite often when you're filling in forms online, it will ask you to perhaps put in your email address. And if you leave it blank, or if, let's say, you put your first name, everyone's got a first name. If there's a box that says put in your title, and then your first name, and then your surname, everybody has a first name. So you've got to put something in there. So we can set the computer up to carry out what we call a presence check. And a presence check is the computer simply asking, has something been put in here? If it's left blank, then what we would get is an error message. An error message saying, you've got to complete your first name because it's not possible not to have a first name. You have to have one, so you've got to put something in there. Another type of validation check is, I've actually put a data type check. And we can do that on our first name here. If, for example, I enter into my first name that my first name is 1234, the computer's going to say, well, hold on a minute, that's not possible because I am expecting to see in here text and perhaps not an integer. Perhaps a better example of data type than that one would be if you're asked to enter maybe a credit card number and you put in a letter in there. There's no letters in a credit card number. So a data type check is going to make sure that the characters that you've entered are the ones that perhaps are expected, if you like. A format check. Let's go back to a field that asks you to put in your date of birth. And let's say you have put in, we ask you to put in date, month, year. One more. And I put in 140819/6, and I forget to fill in that last character. Well, that check, a format check, is basically saying I'm expecting to see 2 numbers, then 2 numbers, then 4 numbers. But because this person has given me 2 numbers, then 2 numbers, then 3 numbers, the date that's been entered, date of birth, is not in the correct format. So once again, this would throw an error message saying, that's not in the correct format, that's not right, you've got something wrong there. Now, sticking with the date of birth, I will put 1969 there, we can put a range check in. Now, it would make sense on this particular one here that if we were entering a date of birth, I could, by mistake, put 9169. Okay? It's presence, it's past that one. It's in the correct data type, it's all numbers. It's in the correct format because it's 9169, it's 4 digits. But clearly it isn't right. So what we might do on a date of birth field is set it up so that the range that can be entered is, let's allow for people that are about 110 years old, and it's now 2012, so I want 1912 all the way through to 2012. I'm only allowed to enter into this box a number that sits between these 2 ranges. Okay, so that's what we refer to as a range check. You can enter some numbers, but it's got to be between 2 finite limits. And finally, just about fit it on, a character count check. Now, I don't know how many of you have got credit cards, but in a credit card, you would tend to find that well, actually, character count's a bit like a format check, really, isn't it? In a credit card, you have to have 16 digits. So if you enter only 15 digits, so 16 digits on a credit card, if you enter only 15 digits, then that wouldn't be correct. Perhaps another type of check that we could say on a character count is that, or a character check, is that, for example, you might want to enter, well, let's do one here. I'm sorry, I'm running out of space. Let's put a character, not a character count check, just a character check would be, let's say I ask you to enter your postcode. Now, a postcode is going to be a combination. I'll put my school one in there of ME10 4DB. A postcode is a combination of letters and numbers. But if I were to put in, instead of a 4 here, let's make that a star. Well, that looks awful, doesn't it? Let's do a little star symbol. There we go, that's a little bit better. Well, I filled it incorrectly. It's passed the presence check. It is because it's data type, because it's alphanumeric. Well, alphanumeric can be letters and numbers and symbols, that's fine. But a character check is going to make sure that I can only accept certain types of characters, and in a postcode all I can accept is from A to Z and 0, I should say, to 9. I shouldn't be able to accept any sort of special characters that we get on the screens like asterisks and question marks and forward slashes and things like that. Okay, so hopefully that's data validation for you. Let's have a quick flip through all of those screens again. You've got your data types. They can be text, numeric, date, gender, images, video, sound. You can code data. Sometimes I've seen that as encoding data, which I don't like. It's coding data. It's where you reduce things down so that you change the codes from an airport from London Gatwick to LGW. Very helpful because it's quicker to type, takes up less space, and it's going to be easier to validate as well. For example, with we're talking about easy validate, all airports have 3 characters. So we can carry it, we can make sure that when someone enters a code for an airport, they have to enter 3 characters in there. It's a character count check, isn't it? Or a format check, it's a bit of both really. Data verification is entering the data twice. The normal way of doing that, as I said, is you'll find boxes on forms that ask you to enter the data twice, and it basically looks to see if they actually match. The chances said if you mistyping something twice exactly the same is pretty small. Validation, I think let's skip validation, and we've gone through that. When you put data into a form, it's looking to see, is it present? Is it of a certain data type? Is it in the correct format? Does it lie within a certain range? And do we have any rogue characters in it that are not possible? So hopefully that's all made sense. It's time to move on to the next video.